The government refuses to do what the public keep on asking for and what the government keeps on saying it'll do. It is seen to be, I think accurately, extremely lax on policing certain social cohesion issues. It's extremely eager to crack down on anyone of a Tommy Robinson type. And what material benefits have come about in the society in the last 16 years have largely gone to people who were not born in the country. I repeat, what is permissible in this situation to do? And I would say peaceful protesting would be one thing, or speaking up, or whatever you like to do, except that every time even there is a peaceful protest, the peaceful protesters are defamed as far-right neo-Nazis.
The shocking reality of an immigration crisis that politicians ignore. What happens when the public begs for changes and the politicians not only ignore them but insult them? In Britain and across the West, there's a growing frustration around mass immigration and the cultural divide it's causing. Are the leaders listening? Stay tuned to find out how these concerns are shaping immigration policy. Welcome back to our channel, where we tackle the pressing issues shaping the world today. In this video, we dive into a deep discussion led by Douglas Murray about the growing frustrations with mass immigration in Britain and other Western countries. British cities are becoming the centre of a brewing conflict. Murray explains how, for 20 years, the public has consistently voted for less immigration. Each election, they are promised tighter controls, but instead, immigration rates have only risen. This gap between public demand and political action is sparking a deep-seated frustration. Murray poses a critical question. What are the people allowed to do when their voices are not just ignored, but insulted?
The idea that people's response to any problems in their society should be to go out and commit acts of violence is obviously insane and wrong. What we're seeing on the streets of the British cities, though, raises this question, as I say, of if the public keep saying something to the politicians and the politicians keep not just ignoring them but insulting them, what are they allowed to do, these people? These are populations that have every single election, like the rest of the British people, for 20 years, they have voted for less immigration and been told that they'd get it. And instead, it's just gone up.
This is not just a UK issue, but a challenge that echoes across the Western world. But ignoring public demands is just the tip of the iceberg. What happens when governments refuse to address the primary issues of immigration? Douglas Murray digs deeper into the West's immigration crisis, arguing that by failing to address the primary issues, such as mass immigration and integration, politicians are creating secondary problems that are far more difficult to solve. Governments have consistently focused on controlling reactions to immigration rather than addressing why it's happening in the first place. By ignoring the root causes, cultural integration, economic strain, and crime, these leaders are only making matters worse.
If you can't say, we recognize your deep concerns about some things that have happened, including mass stabbings, terrorism, and much more. We understand your deep concerns, and we are going to try to get onto this and on top of this. But there is no excuse to turn out on the streets and be violent against your Muslim brothers and sisters and neighbors or anyone else. If they can't say that, they just cannot say it. They just have to go to the secondary thing. What kills me about this is, it's exactly what I've said for years. If you don't deal with a primary problem, you get secondary problems. And if you just focus on the secondary problem, you will you'll not only not solve the primary problem, you will make it worse. Exactly what we're seeing.
But what happens when moral relativism prevents even discussing the real problems of immigration? You've seen how ignoring the main issues worsens the situation, but there's an even deeper problem lurking behind the scenes, one that prevents honest discussions about immigration altogether. The West's moral relativism is part of the reason why immigration issues are not addressed openly. Political leaders hesitate to criticize certain immigrant cultures, fearing accusations of racism or intolerance. This creates a culture where no one can draw distinctions between different values, even when some cultural practices clash with democratic principles. As a result, immigrants from countries without democratic traditions bring their ideologies with them, something that is rarely acknowledged or addressed.
There's no way of drawing hierarchical distinctions between the value claims that different cultures present. We can't admit for a moment that there might be some reason to be leery, let's say, of an immigrant class that would be associated with the kind of education that the madrasas are producing for all sorts of ideological reasons. We can't make any allowance for the idea that some immigrants might be more difficult to integrate into our culture than others. And that is a thorny problem, don't get me wrong. But now, so we open the floodgates, let's say, and we find out that there are people who don't have democracies in their own country because they don't have the culture for it, let's say, or the desire for it. And they bring those attitudes along with them. Surprise, surprise, because they weren't just freedom-loving, oppressed people striving to be free, who are now thrilled to death to be in a democratic country, but people who are pretty damn prone to bring all of the problems that they had in their own country along with them.
Murray explores why Western leaders fail to control immigration effectively. Is it simply that they lack the power to stop it, or are there deeper psychological and ideological factors at play? As technology makes travel and information exchange easier than ever, people around the world are more aware of the opportunities in the West. The allure of a better life in places like Britain or Canada is undeniable.
I mean, 3 billion people are on WhatsApp alone. The ability of people anywhere in the world to discover the life of anyone else in the world easily. It's inevitable that a lot of people will want that. Now, as I've said for years, just because they may want it does not mean that Western liberal democracies can remotely be the place where everybody who wants a better life can or should go. It's simply impossible. And you just crunch the numbers on people in sub-Saharan Africa who want to move into Europe, for instance. And if that happened, if the third of sub-Saharan Africa who want to move moved, Europe would totally unrecognizable.
Western democracies simply cannot accommodate everyone seeking to move. Politicians know this, but continue to push off tough decisions, leaving future leaders to face even bigger problems.
And add to that the fact that, as was famously said in 1968 by somebody, it's the easiest thing to put off any difficult decision you have to make today and leave it for your successors to address.
What happens when illegal immigration spirals out of control? The consequences go far beyond just numbers. We've discussed why politicians hesitate, but what happens when illegal immigration reaches a breaking point? The consequences can destabilize even the strongest societies. Illegal immigration presents challenges that are nearly impossible for Western democracies to address. When millions cross borders without permission, it overwhelms asylum systems, making it difficult to help those truly in need. Murray points out that when governments attempt to deport illegal immigrants, they face immense public pressure. The media often highlights the most emotional cases, such as a woman or child crying during deportation, making it politically unviable to continue. As a result, governments become paralyzed, incapable of enforcing immigration laws.
You and I know that on day one, if you rounded up everyone who is legally in the country and put them on buses, trains, boats, the first woman or child crying would be on the front page of every newspaper the next morning, and by day two, you would have to stop because of public pressure.
We've seen how illegal immigration overwhelms systems, but there's another equally challenging aspect: cultural integration. Integration, or rather the lack of it, is another ticking time bomb. Murray argues that Europe was built on distinct ethnic identities and values, and integrating millions of people from vastly different cultural backgrounds is no easy task. While many immigrants successfully integrate, large portions do not, leading to social unrest, crime, and the creation of isolated communities. As Murray says, European countries are struggling with the question: how do you integrate millions of people into societies that have existed for centuries with their own distinct cultures? The answer seems elusive.
To an outsider, it seems preposterous that the Swedes and the Norwegians would have distinctions between them, but they do. But I say this to say that Europe and Britain was made up of ethnic identities. And those ethnic identities had ideas, of course. But even in Britain, you have the Welsh, you have the Scots, you have the English, the Northern Irish, the Irish. How do you integrate into that? How do you do it? Does anyone know? And the answer is no. Have some people? I'd say yes. Have a majority? It doesn't look that way to me. And so this is just a bomb underneath the societies in Europe in particular.
But integration is only part of the puzzle. What about the very identity of nations? Now that we've touched on the struggles of integration, let's tackle an even more fundamental question. Is national identity being eroded? Murray touches on a vital point: the erosion of national identity. Unlike America, which was founded on an idea, European nations were built on ethnic identities and shared histories. The rapid influx of immigrants from different cultures has, in some cases, challenged these identities. The question becomes, how do you maintain a national identity while embracing diversity? This has led to deep divisions across Europe, with some arguing that nations are losing their cultural essence.
It has been about ethnicity. We don't like things about being about ethnicity, so we say it's about an idea. But all my adult life, this idea has been so hard for anyone to pin down that they've just failed at it time and time again. I'm old enough to remember when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, and I contributed to a book that he edited about being British, what Britishness was. That was 20 years ago. And Britain is no closer to defining that today than it was 20 years ago.
Discussing immigration and national identity is controversial, but what happens when governments fail to acknowledge these problems? Are we heading toward even greater social unrest? As Murray explains, the failure to address the root causes of mass immigration, combined with a reluctance to discuss cultural integration and national identity, is pushing Western societies to a breaking point. The question now is, what's next? Will leaders step up to address these challenges, or will public frustration continue to grow? We want to hear from you. What do you think? Should Western nations tighten their immigration policies, or is there a better way forward? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this discussion insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos. Thank you for watching.